we bought it for just under $11,000 per acre, right?
Mhm.
Which is unheard of, pretty
Wow.
much.
Yeah.
And then we can get a whole subdivision completed. So we're looking at anywhere between 60 to 80 lots on that area. And then we can get that evaluated, right?
Yeah.
So I want to
Yeah.
know, once I get this completed, what would the actual evaluation of this property be worth? You can do that with an appraiser. So then you can really see upfront during your planning stage, what is your upside on that land value? And
Mhm.
again, then you can decide multiple exit strategies. You can design it in a way where you're doing multiple phases and all that kind of stuff. But it's really looking at those two numbers and to figure out, am I buying it correctly? And is there enough upside for me at the end?
Yeah.
Because really, we're only going to do it if you're going to make money out of it, right?
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And yet today we're talking to somebody in Ontario. It is an honor and a pleasure to have Carina Guzman, the land dev queen. Hi, Carina.
Hello. Hi, Axel. Thank you for inviting me today.
Look, it's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to having you on. And before we jump right into it, I just want to remind everyone, thank you for sharing this episode with a friend who you feel could benefit from this conversation with Carina. She's got so much to share. She's done so much. So if you just share it with one person, it'll help them. Leave us a comment, send us a review, or the opposite. I'm not sure which way it goes. And we'll be able to spread the good word. So thank you very much for joining in today. Now, Carina, aka the Land Dev Queen, you've built yourself quite the name and the reputation through your success in land development. So I was hoping to jump right into this. And before we get into the development part, how in the world did you get started in real estate?
Oh my gosh, Axel. So it's kind of like, in a way, serendipitously, because I was in the corporate world. So I live in Ottawa, Ontario. And if anybody knows Ottawa, we're the capital of Canada. It's a government town. Pretty much everybody, almost everyone works for government. We're really bubbled into this government world here. So I worked for government, just like everybody else, for many years. And I was in project management. I did that for many years successfully. I actually kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Worked my way up and all that. But I was always doing real estate investing on the side. I got that from my dad. So my dad, back home, which is El Salvador, I was born and raised there. My dad always bought properties and land, and he
Mhm.
sometimes severed it. And so growing up, like that kind of got instilled in us. We're four girls in my family. And my dad always talked to us about the properties. So it was kind of like normal talking about land or properties. So I kind of got a little bit of that from my dad. And when I was 22, I told my dad I want to buy my first property. Right out of university, I got my first government job. So I was like, I'm just going to go and buy a property right now because,
Nice. Good
I got a
choice.
real job.
Yeah.
So I did that. My dad helped me because I didn't really have any credit history, things like that. And that kind of kicked off my whole real estate journey, and I love that. And I saw the potential because I started house hacking, what they call house hacking now.
Mhm.
They didn't call
Yeah.
that back then. I sound so old, but it wasn't like a thing back then, And I was like, I'm gonna rent out every room. I was, single girl. So, and people were like, why would anybody rent a room? Like, how are you going to do that? And I was just like, I don't know, we'll see. And I did. Like, a lot of ladies who were in university wanted to rent a room. And I did that. And then I saw the potential. And it taught me so much, like how to
Yeah.
deal with tenants, how to manage the money. I put extra money on the mortgage every month. So things like that. And then I saw that potential and I replicated that. So we did that. I did that over and over and over again. So that was really how I started in real estate. Very typical to most real estate investors, the buy and hold strategy,
Yeah.
just like
Mhm.
turnkey, like we were talking about earlier. It's already pre-built. It's beautiful, brand new townhouse or semi, and then you just rent it out. And then eventually, I wanted to take it to the next level. So I really just went to all of the events. Like I was in everything, all of the conferences, anything to do real estate related, I was there. And I networked. And it just happened that I met a girl at one of them, and she said to me that she built semis. And she was the first person back then that I knew that built anything. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know anybody else who did. Everybody else was doing flips or the burrs or the SDU conversions, you know?
Mhm.
And she taught me that. And I was like, okay, well, how do you do that? And like, how do you know where you can do that? And she's like, zoning. And I was like, what's zoning?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you know, and she just taught me that. And she kind of taught me the basics, and her and I became friends. And from there, I just took it on. It just became like an obsession for me. Honestly, like I just saw the potential. And then one day I was listening to, or I was reading the Ottawa Business Journal, and in there it said the city of Ottawa wants intensification around transit. And it was like that bing,
Yeah.
aha moment for me. And I was like, that's it. I just have to follow that breadcrumb. The city already says they want that. I'm just going to go and do it. And within a couple months, I found my first property within literally like walking distance to the transit line, double lot with a little tiny rundown bungalow. And that was my very first project. And from there on, I just kind of took it on. I should have mentioned, I did end up flipping that paper, which if you've heard of any of my talks in the past, I do talk about flipping the paper.
Mhm.
And that just means selling the permitted approvals to somebody who's going to build it. And you make money out of that. And so that first one, I made $250,000 just kind of by accident. I know it sounds funny, but it kind of was by accident.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so cool. I could just like replicate this over and over and over again. And I did that. I've really focused around transit. So for the first few years of my land development journey, I just focused on transit. So
Okay.
I was actually known before the land development queen. I was known more as the transit oriented developer. So a lot of my content in the past has been around transit. And it just made a lot of sense for me because those are the areas that do appreciate faster
Mhm.
and higher in the shortest amount of time. They're usually the best ones where cities are more supportive
Exactly.
up in intensification. And then, of course, it also makes sense because there's a lot of mobility and ideally a lot of amenities around. So it just makes sense for development purposes to focus on those areas, which is what we did. Eventually, we ended up doing a bunch of other things, anything from severances, upzoning.
What severances? Can you define it
Yeah,
for listeners?
for sure. Severances is basically cutting up land into
Okay.
pieces, right?
Mhm.
So you can do that smaller scale where you can take, let's say it's a double lot, for example, or a triple lot, and then sever the land into pieces and sell those for a profit, which is what I've done in the past. Corner lots are the best ones for that, by the way. Just a little bit of information there. You can also upzone. So upzone and sell, it's one of my next favorite strategies. You can force the appreciation of a land by taking it from a very low density zone to a higher density zone. And we like to do that. If I could just upzone and sell, I would do that all day long.
Yeah. And if I can just add, what's the exact process for that? Because obviously everyone wants to add more density. You're allowed to do 3 floors. You'd like to go to 8. Can you kind of walk us through briefly, like what are the steps?
Yeah, I mean, it really varies by municipality, what the requirements are. And I don't mean to make it sound like it's a very easy process because it's kind of not. There is a bit of a work to be done. Depending on the municipality you're in, it could take 3 months, it could take 2 years.
Yeah.
So it is something to look into, but the city, you do have to do a pre-consultation, right? And you do have to make sure that you do your due diligence to make sure what you're proposing to do does meet the official plan. So you can't upzone everywhere. It has to fall in within what the city wants and their view of how they want growth in that area. But if you do it correctly, you do have to still submit quite a few reports. So the city will tell you, fill out, complete these reports. It could be anything from geotechnical report, environmentals, noise studies, traffic studies, all kinds of different kinds
shading.
of report. Exactly. And you submit that package, right? And that package, it can be costly as well, by the way. Like in Ottawa, we're looking at $150,000, $200,000 to submit that entire package. The application alone in Ottawa for zoning amendment is, I believe it's like $42,000 right now.
Oof, yeah.
So it's expensive. Toronto, it's even higher. I think it's in the 70s. For just the application alone. So you can see how it could be expensive. But if you do it correctly and if you buy it right, there is an upside to that.
Huge.
Right. So upzone and sell is a really great way. Site plan approval, which is the next step from zoning. That's another great way to force the appreciation even more. And so you can also flip that paper, or you can keep it yourself and build it out, right? So depending.
So it's site plan is like you get your project approved, you take it all the way to permit, and then you resell it?
This is kind of the next step before permitting. Okay. So there's zoning, and then you would do the site plan, which is actually getting the project itself approved in the sense of the building getting approved. But that the next step, and you can flip it at that point, by the way, with the FPA, the site plan approval. And the next step from that is to get the permits. So if you do flip the paper, it's on the buyer to submit for the permitting, right? And that's just basically going through the Ontario Building Code, getting that approved through that building code. So that's another great way to do it. And that's why I love land development, because I realized very quickly that it's not just about demolishing what's there and building new. There are so many other strategies that you can implement in your business to do multiple projects. And also at the same time, each project can have multiple exits, right? Which is really, really cool. Like, let's say you take a piece of land and you sever that piece of land, you can sell two, keep one, I have friends who have gone through that and students who are going through that, and you can essentially get a free house, right? If you do it properly, in the right areas, those pieces of land that you sever can be worth a lot, and you can sell them for a lot, and you can have a free house that's just kind of sitting there. I was actually just going through my mastermind last night, because we do a land development program. And I was showing a case study that I just pulled out on MLS yesterday. I was kind of looking through. There's a double lot. The house is right on one side, perfect.
Yeah.
It's a corner lot, and you can sever that side piece and sell that for a profit, So little things like that you can do, little things, but they're big in the sense that it can really become profitable for you. And that's how we ended up retiring. So I just wanted to finish that story off. That I was able to do that enough times, and and ended up retiring from my corporate job, and then also retired my husband as well from his corporate job. So we also get to do this full time, which we absolutely love to do.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful story of how you started and how you got where you're today. I love the way you describe it, because as you said, there's so many ways to go about it. And as much as we think of it in a linear process, and nothing's ever straight, but there's, as you said, so many ways to get out, so many different exit strategies, depending on how far and willing we are to take the project. Now, you've described some severances, some site approval, some permitting. Have you also taken some where you've partnered up and taken it to full construction?
Yes, that's right. So before COVID, we did partner with builders. So I do have builder partners who do that. And I really leave that for them, right? So during the design phase, we work very closely. If we know that we want to build this out, we work closely with our builder friends, our partners who will build it out to make sure that everything is meeting the budgets and all that kind of stuff. Even if we want to flip it, to be honest, I have my network of builders who want to buy ready to go build permits.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, if I'm going to flip that, I also work with them directly on the upfront to make sure that what I'm designing is a product that they're going to want to build. So no matter what it is, you still want to be very heavily involved with builders, no matter which exit strategy you want to take. But yes, to your question, before COVID, we did build some out. So we do have some friends who build it out. I leave it to them. They're the experts. I really stay in my lane, kind of like this is my thing. I love doing the project management aspect of it. I love working with my team, the architects, the engineers, everybody being the face of the city to discuss the project. That's my thing, my niche that I really love. But the construction aspect, I leave that to them. And we do build it out. Once COVID hit, two things happened in reality at that point in time. We realized that it was a huge opportunity, COVID, for us to scale our business.
Yeah.
And one way that we could scale the business was to begin using OPM, other people's money. Before that, we were really using our own resources, our own cash, our own thing to do our own projects. And so I decided to learn how to raise capital, how to do it different ways and different strategies on that. And that's really the time where I started raising capital. It was only when COVID hit. And the one way that I could really think about how can I de-risk this for my investors. And honestly, when I first started raising capital, for me, it was such a stressful experience. I think
it's a scary process.
It's so scary, right?
Oh yeah. I'm glad
never...
you're open and honest about it. Some people treat it like it's nothing. And when it's your cash and you make a mistake, I always say, like, I can kick my own butt with my own foot. But if it's somebody else's cash, it's somebody else's foot kicking my butt.
Exactly. I took it I was the most stressful time for me to do that, just to learn how to do it, present it properly, and taking somebody's hard-earned money, especially when some of my investors are like, this is my kids' education fund, or this is my retirement fund. For me, it's like I would lose sleep over this, and I want to make sure that I don't screw up, and you're right, when it's your own money, like, okay, there's delays, maybe there's overruns, but when it's somebody else's money, it's stressful, right? So I want to make sure I do it right. So when I started thinking, okay, how can I de-risk? How can I flip their money quicker? Because land development is not a very quick strategy. This is not flipping a property, especially in Ottawa. We're a very metropolitan area. It takes time to get approval.
It takes years.
Exactly. So, so that was one way. I decided to de-risk my investors' time and money into my projects by not going through construction process and just focusing on flipping the paper, which is what I've been doing for the last 2 years. And that's worked out really well because I can pay off my investors with their interest and everything like that. And then sometimes we just hold on to the property. So with COVID and everything that's going on, we're just holding on to some of those properties and weighing it out until things get more stabilized. And then we'll think about building them out. Some of them we just sold. Yeah. So it's like that. It's just figuring out how you do it. And that's the reason we stopped mostly the whole construction aspect.
Yeah, I know. And it totally makes sense because you're right that you can build a lot of value throughout the development process and you can lose all of that margin with a cost overrun on the construction.
Exactly.
And that doesn't make sense. So as you said, it's a great way to hedge and really protect your investors to make sure that there's only upside. Now, you talked a lot about the transit-oriented development. I mean, there's actually a program like that in Montreal for TOD zones. And it's obviously in big demand. Is there anything else you can think of that would help people who are looking to get into land development on how to think about land valuation? Because it's really like the value of a land is related to what you can build on it and obviously where it's located because you can't move it. So other than transit oriented, can you think of something else that would have the opportunity to create a lot of value?
Other than transit oriented, well, really any type of land development strategy could work, and it does not have to be transit oriented, right? So in terms of valuations, there are two different types of valuations that you really want to be looking at. The first is what you're going to buy it for, right?
Mhm.
So like I'll give you an example. We bought this property, which is only about an hour out of Ottawa. It's a 93-acre property. So thinking about, do I know what I'm buying it for is the right number? How do I know that, right?
Yeah.
And it's really by two ways, comparables, looking at.
Mhm.
Land is a little bit more difficult to find comparables. You've probably
Yep.
seen it already, right? There's really not a lot of comparables, especially in a very dense area or even a very rural area. There
Mhm.
might not even be. So finding that is very difficult. So you really have to get connected with a local appraiser who can do land evaluations. So we did that, right? We had it evaluated properly so that we know what are we buying it for. Ideally, I don't want to buy it at fair market value.
No.
I'm super cheap, Axel. Like I am, when I buy the property, I want to get it at a steal. And
Yeah.
sometimes I give my case studies to my students and they're looking at my number and it's like,
And
where
like,
did you
how did
go
you
with
get
that?
it at that price? Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the reason why is because I'll look at like 200 deals before I even make an
Yeah.
offer. That's
Yeah.
literally how it goes. I
Yeah.
know, so just on the outside, to some people, it might seem like, oh my God, you're killing it. You're doing so much. Like, look at you doing all these projects. But in reality, it takes years.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of background work that is happening in behind the scenes to even just do one, right?
Yeah.
So that's really the reality. But getting back to land, once you know that there is potential for development on that property, you want to then evaluate the different types of highest and best use. And
Mhm.
there's not just one highest and best use. There could be multiple highest and best use for that property. And so this is kind of like that exercise that you have to go through with your team. And what I mean team is architects and planners, to make sure that what it is that you're proposing will be approved by the city, right? So you
Mhm.
want to go through that. And then you know what your upside is. So like this property that I was mentioning, it's a 93-acre property. We bought it for just under $11,000 per acre, right?
Mhm.
Which is unheard of, pretty
Wow.
much.
Yeah.
And then we can get a whole subdivision completed. So we're looking at anywhere between 60 to 80 lots on that area. And then we can get that evaluated, right?
Yeah.
So I want to
Yeah.
know, once I get this completed, what would the actual evaluation of this property be worth? You can do that with an appraiser. So then you can really see upfront during your planning stage, what is your upside on that land value? And
Mhm.
again, then you can decide multiple exit strategies. You can design it in a way where you're doing multiple phases and all that kind of stuff. But it's really looking at those two numbers and to figure out, am I buying it correctly? And is there enough upside for me at the end?
Yeah.
Because really, we're only going to do it if you're going to make money out of it, right?
Yeah. That's the
Otherwise,
point.
and stick with the numbers, stick
Mhm.
really close to the numbers. I know sometimes we can get emotional
And attached.
and attached.
Yeah,
I
of
totally
course.
get it. Sometimes it's like they're your babies,
Yeah.
Totally. I totally understand that, but it's really just about the numbers.
Yeah. Now you mentioned an important point is working with the city. And so for the example that you just brought forward, the 93 acres, it is really, the value is directly related to the best use. Now, in some cases, it might just be to separate the lots, as you said, and to do like, 60 residential lots, or it might be to do some commercial and industrial. To what degree do you work with the city to see what the urban planning department would be open to be able to rezone, and you choose what kind of project you're going to build and develop?
Yeah, you really want to set yourself up in a collaborative position
Yeah.
with any municipality, any city that you're working with. And that's city, county, township, wherever it is that you're working, be very closely tied with it. I really try not to push the boundary too much. I know some people do in the land development space, and that's okay, if that's where you want to go. My whole goal is to de-risk the project as much as possible. As I mentioned, I use OPM, and I take that very
Mhm.
seriously. So I don't want to play around with it too much.
Yeah.
And what I try to do during my due diligence is figure out before I even close on it, right? I just have the property under contract, is to go through a pre-consultation with the city, show them my proposal. And that proposal could be one or two different scenarios. It's okay to go with two different scenarios
Yeah.
and to see what is most likely to be approved by them, what would be most supportive of their official plan. Because really, the city will only allow you to do what they want you to do. And even then, neighbors even have
Yeah.
a little bit of control over that as well. So you really want to set yourself up where you're collaborative. Many townships, many cities have what we call community design plans. They have transit oriented plans. They have secondary plans. Sometimes they're called master plans. Sometimes they're called. You want to follow that as much as you can. This is all public information. It's all out there. You don't have to like reinvent the wheel. All you have to do is follow those breadcrumbs and see the pockets where the city wants this density to happen or the change to happen. And now you're setting yourself up in a position where you're in a collaborative position, and you're more than likely to get better results. And of course, de-risking the project as much as possible. It's always great.
Yeah.
So staying within that realm can really work into your advantage. And I hopefully expedite things a little bit, so it is like we did one, for example, it's in a transit oriented development area. The city has already set it out. It was a very low density zone. So it was actually light industrial, very low density, really run down street, but it's literally walking distance to the transit. So it's considered a transit oriented development zone. And we just put the plans in place to do exactly what the city asked us to do. It took us longer because we were doing it during COVID, but still, the city was so happy about it. They were like, do more. Like, we want this whole street to change. You could just take more. And I was like, let me go get more lots.
Yeah. Let me go buy it. Let me go buy the entire street.
Yeah. So it's a little harder to do by then because, the big sign goes up in the front of your lot and the whole neighborhood knows that you're changing the zone. So it's kind of like out there already, but still, you can put yourself in that situation where you're collaborating. So to your question, do it as much as possible. You want to do it up front. You don't wait until you close. This is something you need to be doing during your due diligence conditional period, right? So making all those check marks to make sure that by the time you're closing, you're very sure that this project is going to be successful.
Yeah. No, as you said, and that's proper planning and building a good team. And I love how you rehashed it about setting up a collaborative environment with the city, because if you're doing projects in Ottawa, you're just going to keep talking to the same person over and over and over again. So that allows you to build that relationship. There is trust, and then it really helps everyone to be able to instill this type of atmosphere.
Absolutely. It's you're absolutely right. You keep on seeing the same planners, the same senior staff, the committee of adjustments, they're usually the same panel, in there. So you really want to set up your reputation to be in a very collaborative, but also communicate properly and have your team there. And I go in there with my team, right? At all of my meetings, I have my architect, I have my planners, I have my project manager there as well. And it's just about setting yourself up for success. And once they see you doing this over and over again, you begin to gain that reputation where you are a land developer. What you do is it's exactly what the city is looking for in those areas, and that you have integrity in what you do, right? So it's very important I think pretty much in any business that you do, to make sure that you're always just staying above board and being very transparent in what it is that you're doing. especially as land developers, I find like a lot of us, we have to deal with some slack, you know. There are a lot of neighbors that are not so happy
No.
for to go and make changes to their neighborhoods and all of that. So and that's normal in our business, by the way. Like you're gonna get it no matter what.
Oh,
If
you're
you're
gonna get
getting
some flack, that's for sure.
oh yeah, like 100%. You're gonna do it. You're gonna get it no matter what. And that's normal. It's okay. But at least being there and listening to the neighbors and being proactive. Again, your question was towards the city, but I could say the same for neighbors as well. We try to be as proactive as possible with them as well, so that once that big sign goes up on the front lawn, nobody's surprised. The neighborhood has already become aware that we're doing this before that big sign has gone up, right? And
Yeah.
we will do those things so that we try to de-risk it as much as possible. We try to get to everybody's concerns quickly and create the design so that it minimizes impacts to the neighbors and all this sort of things. And the city actually really appreciates that.
Yeah.
They will take note of those things that you do to accommodate as much as possible, and they really do. So it's important to do that, and if you keep doing that, people take note, and it really works in your favor.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned, like, you know, with the neighbors and the neighborhood, and it reminds me like how important it is to always be transparent and open. And because on our project, basically the neighbor approached us because she's willing to sell her land, and that was like 6 months into it, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, even better. And so now we have another idea of a building we can do, and that's just because we communicated properly with her. And every time we went on site, went to say hello and just, you know, let her know where it's at and what's going on, and always, hey, you know, is there anything bothering you about what we're doing right now? It's all fenced up and it's land. We had to do a decontamination, but just to let her know and just to build that relationship, so eventually she's the one that says, you know, I'd want to sell as well.
Yes, you never know what's going to come out of a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Those are always the sweet ones. That's really cool.
Carina, I know I could go on for hours talking about this, because both you and I are quite passionate about what we're doing. If people want to find out more about you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yes, you can definitely find me on Instagram, on Facebook. I have the Land Development Queen handle, so that's usually the easiest way. LinkedIn is also really good for me. I like to communicate with people there. And if you did want to meet with me, we can always set up like a calendar link and have you set up a call with me. And I'd be happy to discuss. A lot of people need help in this space.
Yeah.
When I first started, really there was no mentorship. There was nobody that I knew of that was doing it at the scale that I wanted to get into. And somebody who can walk me through something from start to finish. You know, there just wasn't anyone there. So I just made a lot of mistakes. So I'm really happy to share my experience. I'm happy to give you some guidance and give some hints as to, again, de-risking as much as possible. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm more than happy to discuss those things as well and give you some tips on anything land development related.
And if anyone is looking for help, for coaching, reach out to Carina. She's an excellent guide, and she'll be able to help you with that entire process. Now, Carina, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to have you on. And to everyone listening, as usual, research your market, make some offers. Important. Do some research, make some offers, get to know your market. On this wonderful note, stay tuned, share this episode with a friend, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Carina.
You're welcome, Axel.